Hi everyone, this is Professor Benjamin, and you have made it through week 1 of this course. So at the end of each week, I usually send out a video roundup like this, or I will send out a typed roundup. And the roundup is just to go over some housekeeping items, maybe some things I saw, some things that need to be improved upon, and then give you a little bit of background about the past session that we went over, and then a little bit about the session that we have coming forward. So that's really what the whole objective of the roundups are. Make sure that you read them or that you listen to them because they contain helpful information for the midterm and final exam. So a couple just housekeeping items. So it was our first week, so of course the first week is always super hectic for everyone, including me. I'm exhausted. So couple little things. Number one, all initial posts are due by Wednesday and response posts are due by Friday. So initial posts have to be at least 300 words, contain paragraphs, contain sources I have given you, and then you have to include in-text citations, and at the end, the citation in MLA formatting. Couple just little things. A lot of you did really well with the content. Just make sure that, if you're quoting something, you kind of introduce us to the quote, why you're using the quote, and then you kind of extrapolate why you quoted that. So, try and decipher or unpack what the author or the quoted individual was saying. Okay, so that's what you want to do. The other thing is that this week I let you slide on more than 6 people answering each question, but from this point forward, that will definitely stay into play. So what does that mean? Only 6 people can answer each forum post question. If you like a question, then that means you have to get in early and answer it and take it. If you are waiting until Wednesday later in the afternoon or the evening, you want to make sure you get in there, look at what questions have been answered and how many times those have been answered, and then say to yourself, oh, I should stay away from that one because 6 people have already answered that. Maybe I'll pick one that only 3 people have answered. So that's how you want to approach that. Okay, so this week I'll look at that. I'll make sure that 6 people have an answer. If more than 6 people have answered each question, then I can't give you points for that for your initial post. Okay, so they're just like housekeeping items. If you have questions about my requirements for initial posts and response posts, then you want to make sure you take a look at this course information session, and I laid that out in the video on the homepage, but make sure you do that again. Go back and look at that video, but also read these directions. They give you examples and they give you all of my requirements like a checklist for what I want to see in your initial posts and response posts. Okay, so we covered session 1, which was the introduction. A couple important just key topics I want you to think about in there is what is homeostasis? So there's positive feedback, negative feedback loops. In terms of this class, positive feedback loops are actually not great for the environment. Usually the term positive means good, right? But in terms of this class, positive feedback loops actually accelerate and continue the process happening. So in your textbook, they use the example of erosion happens, right? So someone clear cuts a forest, erosion happens, and that eroded material, like in mudslides or landslides, then kills the forest below. Then that sediment ends up in waterways and then kills the fish in those waterways because too much silt content, and then it clogs up the water system. It just continues, right? It's like a domino effect. So positive feedback loops are actually not the best. Negative feedback loops want to try and bring the environment back to its original form. So that's what we call we're trying to get us back to that homeostasis or that balance. And the negative feedback loop in your text, they give you the example of the algae. Any other overpopulation scenarios usually work as well. It will happen eventually to the human population as well, which is eventually we will reach that carrying capacity limit, and somehow the environment will say, listen, you just are putting too much strain on the environment, and they're going to kill off the human population. It could be lack of resources. It could be a virus or a flu, something of that sort. That'll come through and try and keep the population in check. Now, for years, we've been doing a really good job of, beating that. Diseases have come into existence and we've been able to eradicate those diseases or been able to vaccinate against them. But eventually, I think nature always wins, so it'll figure out a way. And I can't tell you when that's going to happen, but eventually that will happen. So that's important in the introduction session. That topic is really important for you. The other thing is how important the scientific method is. So go back and read that and look at how important the scientific method is, especially to our understanding of science and the environment and why we have so much ignorance and complexity with the environment. So they're important topics in the introduction session. Tragedy of the Commons is the session that we'll go over this week coming up. So remember, you have an initial post due by Wednesday, response post by Friday. This week coming up, you do not have a quiz. So remember, you have your quiz for the introduction session due by September 8th. Always, I release the answers to the quizzes the Monday after. So if you have questions why something was wrong or what was the correct answer, wait till Monday. The quiz answers are released to you. You have a couple days to look at them, and then they close. The answers close. So take a look at why you got something wrong. But don't forget that's due by tonight, 11:59. Next week we cover Tragedy of the Commons, and this is the crux of the entire environmental, actually like my entire ethics degree was related to this. My environmental ethics degree is related to this document, which is right here, Tragedy of the Commons by Garrett Hardin. You have to read this because there's extensive questions on the midterm exam. A lot of these questions that are under the forum, you need to include that source as well as another source that is in, maybe another article that's used here in combination in your answer. So I might say to you at the end of this week, like, well, why didn't you include Hardin in here? Or why didn't you use him as a factual basis besides this? So make sure you include him in this. Now, Hardin, and you'll see this explanation in this PowerPoint, but Hardin wrote this rebuttal to a document that was written in the 1800s by William Foster Lloyd. Now, remember, in the 1800s, the only major problem was population. And Hardin talks specifically about population too. But if you just take out population and plug in anything like air pollution or resource limitations or any of that kind of stuff, you'll see that it relates to everything. Okay, so Foster Lloyd wrote this document in the 1800s, and he said the best way to solve the population's problem, which is the fact that we look for a short-term gain rather than thinking about the long-term interest. So, people were exploding their families in size because they wanted to have more farm hands to help manage the farm, right? So more kids, the more free labor you had. And so the population exploded during this time. And also, of course, then came after the 1800s, but, an increase in sanitation and better medication allowed the population to increase as well. And he said, well, the best way to do this is through privatization. So if you privatize areas, then people will be able to take care of their own stuff, and they'll know when they've reached their resource limits. But there's a lot of problems with privatization is we think people will take care of their stuff, but that doesn't mean that always is what happens. And so he gives the sheep scenario. In the 60s, Hardin writes a rebuttal and says, listen, privatization is a technical solution, and then he gives examples. So in this article, you'll see he'll give tons of examples of technical solutions that we have done to help solve our commons problems, which is how we destroy shared resources. And he talks about mutual corrosion. He talks about the welfare state. He talks about cap and trade. He talks about all of these things that we have done technically to solve overuse of resources and how they never work. Well, they look like they work on paper. They're still not working. And so the whole idea is the fact that technical solutions might work, but they won't solve the entire problem. And instead, we really need maybe technical solutions and an extension in morality. So some sort of educational piece, understanding why you're doing what you're doing. So a really great example of this is a technical solution to the straw problem is that we now have reusable straws. Right? That's the technical solution to the straw problem. Instead of just telling people, like, stop using straws. Do we all really need to use straws? Straws were invented to help children drink. They weren't intended for adults ever to use. And so I think it's really important for us to understand as adults, unless we have a disability, we should not be using a straw. Just period, end of story. You can drink out the side of a glass. And the issue is the fact that we doubt the science behind dishwashers, that they're clean enough, when in reality they're super clean. We do a lot more other dirty things, are exposed to a lot more bacteria during the day, like our cell phones, than we actually are when we drink out of a cup that has been washed by a dishwashing machine in a restaurant. And so that is where the whole crux is we have this technical solution, but it's really not getting at the heart of it, which is we need to be educated on the fact that we do not need to use straws. And so that's what the whole article is about. So as you're reading the article, think about, well, he's proposing this technical solution. He's telling me about this technical solution and this technical solution. He's explaining to me why they do not work. Okay, so that is the whole idea of this tragedy of the commons. It's an important concept. You need to understand it because it relates to everything else this semester. So it's one of those building blocks that everyone talks about. So everything else we learn this semester will go on top of that tragedy of the commons article. So it's absolutely essential that you read it. And make sure you use it in your answers to the forum post questions. So some of the questions look like they're not asking for tragedy of the commons, but they actually are. One other point I want to talk about, invasive species. So this session talks about invasive species. And I want to explain how there's a difference between invasive species that are tragedy of the commons and just plain invasive species. So invasive species that are tragedy of the commons are species that are brought in for human gain. That might be a beautiful flower or ballast waters, or we try and solve an algae problem by bringing an Asian carp. Okay, that is what I'm talking about. Invasive species that are introduced into ecosystems by nature. Maybe a bird carries a seed from one area to another area, or a species migrates on a raft over from another country. That is not invasive species through tragedy of the commons. Okay, in tragedy of the commons, invasive species is when it's introduced for human short-term gain. Okay, so please remember that when you're answering the forum questions this session. I hope I gave you some helpful background information as you're reading along tragedy of the commons. It is a little bit hard to read. I would give yourself enough time to maybe read it over twice so that you really get an idea about it. Of course, if you have any questions, reach out. And I look forward to your post this week. So don't forget, initial post due by Wednesday, response post due by Friday. And next week, you're lucky you don't have a quiz. Okay, but don't forget your quiz on the introduction chapter due by tonight, 11:59. Okay, sound good? If you have any questions, remember, reach out. And I hope you have a fantastic week.